Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. I'm still doing the transition with regard to that. I'm getting through this, and then so I'll focus on her at the end of the month. So that's at the end of the month. Technically, it's at the end of the month. So yeah. Mhm.
Okay. we are connecting now. So how many more seconds?
I'm Pierre and Lisa. What's up, guys?
Hi, Marcus.
Good to see y'all.
Good to see you.
Good morning,
too.
brother.
We're live. Okay. Good morning, everyone. Good morning. Good morning. My name is Zena McClain. I am your candidate for District Attorney of Chatham County, Georgia. And it gives me great pleasure to welcome each and every one of you to this discussion on the business of prison. Today, you're going to hear from a panel of experts in their respective fields. We have attorneys, we have politicians, we have educators, we have business owners, we have a number of experts who will give some insight on the business of prison. One of the issues I've placed at the top of my platform of change is the issue of mass incarceration. In case you didn't know, Georgia spends approximately $1.2 billion a year housing prisoners. Georgia pays 2 private prison companies $140 million a year to house 15% of its inmate population. That's double what Georgia spent approximately 12 years ago. The companies are Florida-based GEO Group and Nashville, Tennessee-based Core Civic, formerly known as Corrections Corporation of America. Last election cycle, both companies actively contributed over $300,000 to state lawmakers, hence the reason for this discussion. The prison industrial complex, perhaps you've not heard of that term, but that term was coined approximately, I want to say 3 decades after the war on crime began. It's a term used to describe the overlapping interest of government and business. So in a moment, I'm going to turn this discussion over to our panelists. You will hear from them. You will also have an opportunity to ask questions of our panelists. Should you have a question, please feel free to type your question in the comments section below. Hopefully, each of our panelists have shared this discussion on their respective pages. So we invite you to share. Share with your friends, share with your family. The more, the merrier. And ask questions. Again, you can send your questions via the comment section below, or you can send your question to me via text message to 912-447-5082. That said, I will now turn it over to our panelists. And each of the panelists will introduce themselves. They will tell you a little bit about themselves and then go into their discussion. So first we have Mr. Max Sims. Max Sims, if you're ready to go.
Yeah, well, thank you so much for doing this. It is a real pleasure to be able to come on here and talk with, so many distinguished folks who know a lot about this issue. I am Max Sims. I am a Democrat running for the Georgia House of Representatives here in Savannah, Georgia, District 163, which is most of West Savannah and then everything from River Street down to Durin. So, we have a huge problem in this state, particularly when it comes to the issue of criminal justice, and it desperately needs reforming. A couple of years ago, Nathan Deal led a bipartisan task group to reform some of the prison system. And we did get some good reforms out of that, but there is still so much room for improvement left to be made. So I'm going to talk just for a minute here about a couple specific policy proposals that I think would be helpful in rehabilitating the prison system, and sort of why these are important and what it's going to do to have a larger societal impact. So as you expressed previously, we have about 15% of our prison population in the state in private prisons. Now, there's a whole bunch of problems with private prisons ranging from the fiscal to the moral. So I'll cover a couple of those real quick. So private prisons as an industry, number one, are just immoral, right? We shouldn't be actively trying to make a profit-making mechanism out of the incarceration of other human beings. And it establishes a really perverse incentive structure as far as the way these corporations behave. And what I mean by that is that they will spend a lot of money to go up to the legislature and pay politicians campaign donations in exchange for lobbying efforts on essentially making the criminal penalties for offenses higher. So what they would like is to see more people locked up for longer, and ideally in a situation where they are not rehabilitated on the other side of the prison, and so they will engage in recidivist activity and end up back in the prison later on. This is essentially the revolving door that exists in these corporations, trying to get folks back into the prisons after they've already been there and trying to get them to stay there for longer once they're there, essentially because these prison systems get paid by the bed. So that's step one, is ending private prisons. And that'll go a long way towards fixing a lot of the structural iniquities in this system. The second thing that I want to look at is ending the criminal association with marijuana. So we need to decriminalize marijuana. We need to do it immediately. And the reason why is because nonviolent marijuana offenders make up a substantial portion of our prison system. There's also a racial inequity with this, because if you are a Black person, or particularly a Black man smoking marijuana, you are more likely to get sentenced to prison for longer than a white person, or particularly a white man that's smoking the same drug. So there's a racial inequity here, but also this contributes to generational cycles of poverty. As we lock up men who, their only criminal history is having been caught with a couple grams of marijuana. As we lock these folks up, this takes fathers away from families, and then that contributes further to the deconstruction of the American family that ultimately leads to kids being in prison later on in their life. So we've got to end crimes that don't hurt anybody, right? With the criminalization of marijuana is rooted in long-standing racial prejudice, and so it must be ended as soon as possible in order to fix this issue. The last thing I want to talk about when it comes to our prisons is what the purpose of the prison system is. There's two competing philosophies here. Either the purpose of prison is for punishment, or the purpose of prison is for rehabilitation, but it cannot be both. So right now, Georgia and many other states across the union adopt a model of prison where the purpose is to punish people that engage in criminal activity. I believe that the purpose of prison should be rehabilitative. We should be trying to make sure that people come out on the other end of the prison system better than they came in. We should be trying to make sure that prison is a place where people can get skills that they need not to engage in recidivist activity. A lot of people have the assumption that crime is rooted in evil. That's not the case. Crime is rooted in desperation. Crime is rooted in poverty, and crime is rooted in a lack of education. So of course, we need to fix a lot of these things with legislative reconstruction that doesn't have to do with the prison system. But particularly once you're in the prison system, we should be giving people that have criminal records the ability to come out on the other end better than they came in. So that includes expanding access to GED programs in prison, expanding access to college courses and dual enrollment while they're in prison, making sure that there is a reintegration pipeline at the end of the prison system where you're registered to vote so that you can engage in the civic society, where you have everything that you need, where you have an ID so that you can get a job, particularly cross-training programs inside the prison where you have the skills that you need to get a job on the other end. This is how we correct the structural inequities involved in prison and how it relates to the poverty cycle. These are the things that we need to do. And I look forward to hearing some of the other panelists' ideas on this. As well, I will mention, again, my name is Max Sims. I'm running for State House District 163. You can follow me on Facebook, Twitter, or you can go to macforga.com and sign up for my email list. So thank you so much for having me, and I look forward to questions.
Thank you, Mr. Sims. You've given some something to think about, and we're going to wrap back around to you. Let's now go to Attorney Pierre Eiffel, and let's hear his thoughts on this issue. Attorney Eiffel.
Hi, good morning.
Good morning.
Good morning. My name is Attorney Pierre Eiffel of the Eiffel Law Group. I'm also a reserve deputy sheriff for the DeKalb County Sheriff's Office. So this particular topic is extremely interesting to me, as I have a multitude of different experiences with the prison industrial system itself. I am one for reform in the prison system. I truly believe that mass incarceration disproportionately favors African Americans and minorities. I am of great belief that we need to definitely enhance the rehabilitative services provided in the prison system. One thing I can say that DeKalb County on the county level is doing so well is that they have instrumented a program where low-level offenders are offered a welding program where they're taught welding skills before they're able to get out of jail. And once they finish their certification for the welding program, they are guaranteed a job. They are guaranteed a job once they're released. I think on the local level and on a state and federal level, more programs like this need to be implemented so that we give our citizens, because they're citizens, whether they're incarcerated or not, they are citizens, to give them a chance to be productive citizens in our society. I see it time and time again, there's a revolving door in the prison system, and it's because of lack of resources, it's because of a lack of finances, and it's because of a lack of education that we have this revolving door. Also, being in law enforcement, I see how law enforcement tends to patrol African American and minority communities at a disproportionate rate than they do the majority communities, which in itself leads to mass incarcerations of minorities. So once again, I believe that the rehabilitative services need to be enhanced in our prison systems. I think it starts at the local level also, really getting into the root of community policing so that the members of the law enforcement force become actual members of their community. They know the people that they're actually patrolling, they're protecting, they're serving. That way that there's not a disconnect there when they are providing those law enforcement services. I'm not running for office. I'm a concerned citizen of the state of Georgia, and I want what's best for the citizens here. Thank you.
Thank you, Attorney Eiffel. You and Mr. Sims raised some very insightful, gave some very insightful thoughts, particularly as it pertains to services, programs offered at the prison or the county institutions. Take, for instance, Chatham County, our county. The only programs I'm aware of over these years are conflict resolution. You have a GED program at the county jail. You have a ministerial program where they, but you don't have an imam. They don't have an imam who comes in for those who are Muslim. You have a dog training program at the county jail, which I guess is a therapeutic program. But there are no college level programs, and there are no training programs where inmates who are released can go out and have a job upon being released. And as many of you may know, the sheriff is the person who controls the type of, makes a decision as to the type of programs that will take place at the local jail. So that's something to think about as you give your thoughts on this whole prison industrial complex. But now let's go to a provider, Mr. Dexter Newby. Let's hear from Mr. Dexter Newby. Mr. Newby, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you. How you doing?
I'm doing well, Mr. Newby. How are you?
I'm doing well. First, I want to say thank you for inviting me to this discussion. This is a very, very interesting discussion that I think we must have. My name is Dexter Newby. I work as a substance abuse counselor. I'm actually the manager for a substance abuse outpatient clinic, and also the manager for a drug court program, which is part of the Georgia Accountability Court. Retired military, and just want to give back to my community. You know, when I thought about this discussion, I looked up a couple of facts when we talk about the prison system. We know the disproportion of, you know, when it comes to African American, Latino, and white population. As Mr. Sims discussed earlier, you know, when he talked about the marijuana use, the rate of drug use and sales are similar across the racial lines. Black, white, Latino, you know, everybody sells and use drugs. But the important picture here is that Blacks and Latinos are more likely criminalized. You know, that's a problem. African Americans make up roughly 18% of the population, US population, while Latinos make up roughly 13 to 15%. But when you look at the population, the prison population, over 50% of the prison population is African American males. And Latinos, African Americans, and Latinos makes up over 45% of the population. Now, when you look at it and you think about, okay, we have violent charges, we have non-violent charges. Well, 450,000 people are incarcerated for drug possession. That's 4 out of 5 people incarcerated for drug possession, non-violent charges. You know, the criminal justice system is, I understand that we do need to lock up people, but we're not doing it fairly. It's not happening fairly. You know, we had a law in place where 100 grams of powder cocaine, you get the same sentence for 100 grams of powder cocaine as you do for 1 gram of crack cocaine. Now, how is that fair? I don't see it. You know, if you think about it, like you alluded to earlier, Ms. McLean, you know, Georgia spends $140 million annually to privatize prisons. Now think about if Georgia placed that money in rehab. You know, if they place that money in rehabilitating non-violent offenders with drug possession, you know, drug users. My position, I work for the drug court program. And instead of our program, instead of people going to prison, they come to our program, we work on rehabilitation. And do we have a high percent? No, we don't, unfortunately. But there's also the RSAT program, which is the residential substance abuse treatment, which is a more, it's like a prison system, but it's drug abuse. You get drug addiction counseling in there. Come out and they come, once they complete that, they come right back to us in most cases, and, you know, for the aftercare program. And then we see a difference for, you know, I just think that in most cases, you know, we're African Americans and Latinos, we're getting the raw end of the deal, you know, when it comes to these drug charges. You know, I want to also, as a counselor, as a substance use counselor, I know we discussed, you know, lessening the charges for marijuana use. And I understand because it is targeting African Americans and Latinos. But as a counselor, you know, I want to throw caution because we're not talking about the same marijuana that, you know, our grandparents was using. You know, marijuana nowadays is being laced with chemicals, fentanyl, meth, cocaine. So I want to throw caution to that because I do not think that by lessening the charge is going to fix the problem. It is more of a systemic problem, you know, with the policing, with the lawmakers. I think that is where this problem needs to be addressed. So again, my name is Dexter Newby. Thank you for allowing me to have this, being a part of this discussion.
Thank you, Mr. Newby. And I'm glad you brought that up because that is something I'm always aware of, the marijuana issue. I mean, it can raise so many different issues when you talk about marijuana and decriminalizing marijuana, which I understand the science behind that. However, as I've seen the law, as it applies here in Chatham County, what happens, people forget about other aspects of the law. And what you have to understand about marijuana is on the books, it's still illegal. Therefore, it is probable cause to make an arrest, to make a stop. If an officer smells the odor of marijuana, an officer can pull you over. They forget about that. The officer is not just issuing a citation because in the city of Savannah, yes, the city of Savannah has issued an ordinance where an officer can, if he or she choose, can issue a citation. But what's happening is the officers use it as probable cause to conduct a search. And what happens when you're searched, other evidence may come up. If you have a gun, if you have paraphernalia in your car. So that leads to additional charges. You've also mentioned that the marijuana today is not like your marijuana of yesterday. You are correct, because nowadays marijuana is laced with a lot of stuff. When I was younger, it was laced with PCP. So nowadays it can be laced with a number of things. So there are a number of issues. And then as a parent, it would be hypocritical of me to teach my children not to use drugs, to not do marijuana in my house, and then for me to preach out here when I'm politicking, oh, it's okay. No, there's no double standard. So I always, when I discuss marijuana, I'm always raising these issues to get people to think. And also, you have to understand this, in order to get the jobs that pay the money, you're going to have to pass a drug test. For those blue collar jobs, you are not going to get a job welding. You're not going to get a job driving a rig. You're not going to get a job out there at the port if you're using marijuana. So I take issue with people trying to get our young people to think that it's okay to use marijuana because it raises so many different issues. But thank you for that. And we're going to move on here. Let's hear from an elected official, Mr. Maceo Mahoney. Mr. Mahoney, let's get your thoughts on this issue, sir.
Yes, ma'am. Good morning, everybody. So glad that you guys invited me to join the conversation and to bring an elected official standpoint. Also, I'm the president of Georgia Municipal Black Caucus, which is over all the African American elected officials, mayors, and city councilmen across Georgia. And last year in Savannah, we was pushing for a marijuana ordinance citywide as a sight and go offense. And basically we was pushing for that for the same reason you guys are sharing today. You know, a lot of African Americans are disproportionately arrested. And these things cause a lot of problems in our communities. Just take, for instance, if a person, just like you were just saying, got caught with marijuana. Well, to get caught with marijuana and there's no ordinance, then they go up under the state code. And these people now lose their jobs. A lot of them, when they get in jail, they can't make bond. So now you don't lost your job, you can't make bond. You can't pay your fines, and so you find yourself being repeated in the system. So that was one of the issues that we posed, and we thought about actually trying to create across Georgia to create a marijuana ordinance as a cite and go offense. But the biggest thing I think that, us as elected officials, we got to understand the demographics of our communities. We got to meet people on their need, meet people where they're at, what their needs are at. My district, which is, it houses probably 4 housing authorities is in my district. The state of Georgia, we apply for a lot of CDBG grants to try to build community centers, to try to create a type pathways for people to get involved in so they can get outside the poverty arena. But we have poverty issues in poverty areas. So we got to understand the data. We got to understand the demographics. And we have to meet people where they are. Until we do those things right there, everything that we talk is actually going to go over their head. They're not going to be susceptible to it. On the local level with our sheriff department, our judges, and our DAs, we got to have relationships with them. We have to talk and advocate for their needs. I have a great working relationship with our sheriff department as well as our DA. As a matter of fact, last year we had a expungement project he partnered with me with. And so, we understand that some people need to be held accountable, but where we can offer any type of services, any type of resources to help people find that pipeline for success, that's what we need to be encouraging people to do. And our legislators, we have to watch these laws that are going to the Capitol, and we got to get in the gap with it. And we have to invite them down to our communities and let them know, what type harm that some of these laws that they're trying to legislate, how it affect us. And we have to have conversations like this right here. We have to bring the lawyers in the room. We got to bring Mr. Newby, the brothers on the sheriff department, the collaboration of you guys knowing and seeing things that we don't see. Because you guys are professionals at this and we're not. But, we have to find ways to create success in a lot of these communities where there's poverty. I'm a strong believer if you get rid of the poverty, listen, nobody making $100,000 job finna go out there and be smoking no marijuana because they don't want to lose their job. But we got to create the success stories. So I'd like to say I thank you guys for having me on. I'm here to listen. I want to share. I want to partner. Anything I can help do on the local aspect and share with the caucus, I will do it. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mahoney. You, again, you also raised some interesting topics. I want to encourage our listeners, our viewers on Facebook, if they have a question, please send your question via the comment section below, or you can text your question to me at 912-447-5082. Mr. Mahoney just mentioned advocating for changes to laws. We have 2 individuals or 3, we have a couple of individuals that are running for office on this panel. And one thing as it relates to drugs that I need people to understand is that there are laws on the book. And as a district attorney, you have to follow the law. But you also have a lot of discretion on the type of cases that you want to indict or charge, blah, blah, blah. That being said, when it comes to marijuana and these other drug charges, you have to remember that there are mandatory and minimum sentencing with respect to a lot of these laws that are on the books. And so it is important, it is necessary for you to get with your elected official, especially your state lawmaker, if you see a need to change a law, you need to raise that with your respective elected official. That being said, I will now move to Mr. Marcus Thompson. Mr. Thompson, can you hear me? Would you like to join in at this time?
I can hear you, and thank you very much, Zena. My name is Marcus Thompson. I am running for state representative for District 164. That is South Savannah, Pooler from Quaco Road, Bloomingdale, Georgetown, Richmond Hill, and a part of Liberty County. I think once I started looking into this, I think Max Sims hit it on the head, Pierre also, Maceo, Dexter. all of you touched based on everything that was important, but I think there are some undercurrents that is driving a lot of this. And I think it might be one of the things it might be is we're not taking mental health seriously in this state. For the most part, we don't even take healthcare seriously in this state. We're number 46 in the nation for access to preventative healthcare and mental health facilities. That's incredible. Now, when I think about what's going on in the prisons, you look at there's this article in Reuters that I read. What this shows me is that there is no accountability, no ownership, no oversight, and no scrutiny. Now, even when there is some slight oversight in some of the providers that are servicing these for-profit prisons, they then waive the recommended financial consequences because they don't want to pay them. I mean, it's incredible. You bring in a monitor, the monitor says that this provider is doing this and this and this wrong. And then you say, you know what? Okay, thank you. We're not going to listen to you at all. What I read here, and I will be glad to share this link, is that people are willing to sell you something. And then when you get the job, or when you're elected into office, or when you finally take office, you switch it up and you're no longer held to those promises. You just sold something to the people and now you've played the people, because there was a number of times in here and that an institution said that they were going to be change makers. They were going to stop the deaths and the suicides that were going to happen. But as soon as they got the contract, they brought in a monitor because they were going to make a reforming effort. And then 6 months later, they kicked the monitor right back out. There was no teeth in the contract, in the consequences. I think one of the only ways that we can do this is really, we need to not only look at these contracts and the monitors that are actually trying to enforce them, but we need to give power to those monitors and let them be able to push the consequences, because that is the only way that we are going to be able to cut this prison to legislature to sheriff pipeline and just stop the nonsense. Because right now they're not able to do it. And I think it's an amazing thing to just sit here and watch that and not do anything about it. How? And then on top of that, the vast majority are minorities. Are you telling us that these people's lives don't matter? Are you telling me that because you've already been paid for a prescription, the pharmacy, Quick RX, has a contract with a prison here in Chatham County? They did not provide prescriptions that they were already paid for. Instead, they coerced the nurses to say that, oh no, the prisoners are refusing the medications. That's why they're not taking them. Where's the oversight? It is incredible, man. I was reading this shaking. Now, I understand these people are in prison. I understand these men, these women may have done something wrong, but I also know that mistakes can be made. I also know that when people are on the edge, they don't necessarily need to be thrown in prison and the book thrown at them and then the medications taken away. Maybe somebody needs to come in there and try to help them. Maybe somebody needs to come in there and try to talk to them. They don't need to be just thrown away as if as they're being done right here. It has to end. And I think the only way that we can do that, and this is what I plan to do, is have weekly accountability sessions, both leading up to the general election in November and through my term as state representative. This is a weekly thing that I want to do, because right now there's no way to really hold Ron Stevens accountable for the things that he's allowing his pharmacy company to do. What are you going to do? Call his office? Okay, let's wait for a call back on that. No, I will hold accountability meetings for both the votes that I plan to make, the decisions that I plan to make, the laws I plan to look at and review. And every week you'll be able to log in virtually even if you can't come personally, of course, COVID-19 is a factor. But if you can't come personally, you log in virtually, and you'll have access to me. No, I won't be able to make everybody happy. That's impossible. But I promise you this, I won't let this mess keep going on. Thank you, Zena.
Thank you, Mr. Thompson. And you also raised some interesting things there, especially the issue of healthcare and mental health. Mr. Sims did raise this issue when he talked about generational issues. I had someone send a message in the comment section that African Americans suffer from post-traumatic stress disorder for generations. And that is true. What you have to understand about the healthcare thing is that there are so many people who have never had health insurance. Therefore, they don't have a record, a documented record, a history of mental health issues. And so when you don't have a documented record, you don't qualify for mental health court. And so while it may be apparent to some people just visually that there may be something going on, if you don't have a documented record of mental health, you will not qualify for the mental health court. A lot of people don't understand that. And also the thing that hurt people hurt. And that contributes to the crime problem that we have. And so there is a need out there for healthcare. We need to get more people adequate healthcare, especially mental health. And also that mental health thing, that the healthcare issue. The sheriff controls a lot of what happens at the jail. He determines how his money is going to be spent. He determines who gets contracts, blah, blah, blah. So thank you for raising those issues. Of course, when it comes to the state, it is vastly different from the issues at the federal level. We do have a candidate for United States Congress on with us today, Ms. Lisa Ring, and she will give some thoughts as it relates to the federal side of this. Ms. Ring, are you ready to go?
I am. Thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
It's an honor to be here today, and it is very informative to hear everybody's perspectives. Everybody has something to offer to this conversation. My name is Lisa Ring, and I'm running for Congress in the 1st District of Georgia, which is the entire coast. The reason that I'm running is to empower voters and to make changes that directly affect their lives. Certainly, reform of our criminal justice system is a pressing issue, and it is at all levels. As a former corrections officer in Pennsylvania, I saw firsthand how we fall short of serving the needs of inmates, how we are not providing adequate health care, we are not providing adequate services, and we are not doing enough to prevent things like suicides, which I witnessed firsthand, which is something that was brought up in this article that was already mentioned in Chatham County, the number of suicides happening and the lack of mental health care as well as medical health care. Also, as the executive director of an anti-recidivism program, a wildly popular and successful anti-recidivism program, I saw that if we were to help parolees or those who have been incarcerated, help them to pay their fines, to find a job, to provide counseling and one-on-one services, to help them be productive members of society instead of allowing them to just continue in the system, we can make a significant difference. I was the director of this program that had a 20% recidivism rate. So it was more successful than other programs throughout the country. However, after 2 years, the governor allowed this program to be shut down because he didn't want to provide funding. Now, this was over a decade ago and 1,000 miles away. The problems have only grown in scope. And we have to do something about this, because what it comes down to is who our elected officials are and following the money trail. If we look at the people who are providing services at the Chatham County Jail, we see that a senator is providing dental services. We see that a state representative is providing pharmaceutical services. And we see a network of the sheriff and our congressmen really profiting off of the incarceration of people in this county. My opponent alone, Congressman Carter, has investments in Geo Group. So certainly, if he is invested in private prison, he is going to do everything he can to make that a lucrative investment. These are issues that we have to address, along with all of the reforms that have been mentioned. And I would like to add getting rid of cash bail, providing alternate courts and alternate forms of supervision. And I also wanted to say something about decriminalizing marijuana. I think that we're not talking about advocating marijuana. We're talking about decriminalizing it so that it is not an excuse for incarceration. And I do think that that is the way to go, just as we did with alcohol. We can treat it as smoking cigarettes or drinking alcohol, not something that we encourage, but not something that we incarcerate people for. Something that we can regulate, monitor closely, and perhaps provide revenue for states and for our federal government to provide services and to better meet people's needs. So we have a lot of work to do, and what I'm encouraging people to do is look at who your elected officials are. Look at what they're doing, look at the relationships that they have and the legislation that they are pushing. Are they personally benefiting from it, or are we benefiting from it? That is how we need to start making decisions, and that is the only way that we will reform all of our systems to meet our needs.
Thank you, Ms. Ring. Thank you for bringing that back into, into perspective. Follow the money. Yes, whether or not they're personally benefiting, that is so important. You made an excellent point when you said that you're for decriminalizing marijuana, not advocating for that, and that is true. There is some benefit, there is a benefit to decriminalizing it. So I appreciate your thoughts. Now we will move on to an educator, a professor, an activist, a boots on the ground person, Dr. Jamal Toure, who will give his thoughts on this issue. Dr. Toure.
Good morning, greetings to everyone. What we're dealing with, people think about crime. They think about crime being about punishment. They think about prisons about punishment and crime, but it goes deeper than that. And it goes back in time that we've been dealing with this issue with regards to the business of prison, the business of punishment, going back some 500 years. No reason. I know some people are going to get offended by that. That's the reality of it. I tell folks, I say, just don't look at the surface. The surface is for us to look at the prison, but look at the genesis of it all. Where does it begin? And we know that always has gone on, but we're looking at how this system right here, how has the United States handled it? It has handled it as a business always, and it continues. We see evolutions of it. We see how it evolves. So I say, go back into the history of it, that again, and the person who put it out there, that African people suffer from, some call it post-traumatic stress disorder, or some call it post-traumatic slave disorder or post-traumatic slave syndrome. The trauma that is still resonating in these families going back, say, some 500 years. Because with schizophrenia, just to throw this out there to folks, I used to be a coordinator of a program, a homeless program, that addressed people who had issues of substance abuse, mental health, and HIV/AIDS. So we had to deal with the courts. So we dealt with that. I saw that, and I understand the trauma that resonates in the lives of these people today, their children, that you talk about, the generational issues that comes down to it. So again, we have to address that. Now, the sad part of this, the ugly part of this too, what I talk about and share with people is this, and some of y'all alluded to it, but I'm going to put it out there. People's lives are expendable. Certain people in this society, their lives are expendable. We use them up and spit them out, and they have children, and guess what? Their children fall victim to this entire system also, so they become a part of it. You're not concerned about them if they're inside a jail and a prison. So when we talk about the business of prison, it's the business of prison and jails also. So I'll lump them all together. So now what happened? A father or a mother, their sons or their daughters, their nephews, their nieces now fall victims to the being expendable. You don't have a concern about someone in the jail or in the prison with regards to them getting proper treatment. And what is shameful that when you have elected officials who are profiting off of this right here. I'm not saying any specific person, but I'm just giving you what is happening across this entire country. It's not just just Chatham County or state of Georgia, across the entire country. We have to learn to address this right here. Crime is tied to economics, tied to opportunities, and education. And we don't address those things. And look at the state of Georgia. In Georgia, we fall to the bottom with regard to education. Look at economic opportunity. We fall to the bottom with regard to that for people of color. We got to address the parity that has to come about. But some of us still want to hold on to the lies. We want to hold on to our own security and not understand. And as Council Member Maceo Mahoney said, yes, if somebody making $100,000 a year, they're not going to be concerned about trying to commit crimes because they not have a way to take care of their families. And we don't do anything to address those families. I do something that I do with some of my scholars at Savannah State. I do something I call the anatomy of crime, the anatomy of the criminal justice system. And we go and I go through and give them the process. But I also come with something called, I ask them and say, what is your criminal autobiography? Your criminal autobiography. For see, some of us, we've had experiences as youth with regards to law enforcement that sometimes was not pleasant. Sometimes we were terrorized by that. They may have harassed us. And I tell folks, that's a part of the trauma that's happened to communities. When in West Savannah, there was a shooting, a murder that occurred regarding a young man, African-American man, and people were protesting what happened in West Savannah. Later on, Chief Lumpkin, the chief of police for the Savannah Police Department, when it was Savannah Chatham at the time, he then called folks from the Department of Justice to come down here and talk to folks out of the communities, community leaders, to now talk about what we need to do, how we need to work this, because he discussed what happened in Ferguson. They had gone to Ferguson. That's a part of the Department of Justice that people don't know about, and people don't advocate with regards to that. When Dexter Newby mentioned about community policing, that is necessary. We have to be able to address the people in the communities as human beings. They're not expendable. Give you a story about Brunswick, Georgia. Now, not about what happened with Brother Ahmaud, but in Brunswick, Georgia in the 1990s, and it hasn't changed per se, there were individuals who had now gotten off of parole, so to have their rights restored, and their rights were not restored. So that meant that they were not a part of the political forum anymore, not a part of the political arena. They were still denied. Here you go, people who should be providing that service to them were not, because they want them still to become victims of the system, for them to profit off of it. We have situations right now, whereas we have corporations making monies off of the labor of prisoners. We have individuals in counties making profit, making money off of the people detained in the jails. We have that occurring. We have people making money off of expendable people. Now, I'll let you all understand this. People talk about rehabilitation. People talk about punishment. I am what I call restorative. I believe in restorative justice, not the faddish restorative justice people talk about today. Restorative justice with regards to individuals being rehabilitated, but also addressing the issue regarding the punishment that's going on. Because it's about a healing that needs to happen for everyone. Restorative justice for me is about making sure we make sure folks are being rehabilitated, but also addressing what caused the problems and making sure that that person is not going to be involved in that again. And so we sit back and we have elected officials, we have corporations, everyone profiting off of this, and it is shameful and it needs to stop. And we need good people to now stand up and let their voices be heard with regards to this. And with regards to candidate ring, when she talked about cash bail systems, that's one thing that I promote, and I tell them we have to be about that. Bail reform is necessary. It's all a part of the same system. And candidate McLean, when she talked about pretextual stops, excuse me, she didn't say that. I said pretextual stops. That when I detect marijuana, that opens the door for me not to go on for other things. And that then damages families for generations. Because when that father or that mother is not being detained, they become a victim of the business of prison system. Again, the business of prison system or the business of jail system that impacts the children in those families. It impacts that now they begin to lose that economics. So it resonates for generations in those families. In addition, I throw this out there and tell folks that we have to be about advocating for the truth. We cannot be ideologues, and many of us are ideologues. We have to advocate for the truth and go forward with that. That is necessary for us to reform the system, because we have seen slavery, or read slavery by another name, the peonage system, where you can be incarcerated and put in jail and held in captivity, and they use your labor. But then we also understand about labor's body down, where people now, farmers, were in rural areas here in Georgia, and not just rural areas, where they were able to go to jails and now get the labor of folks and then kill them indiscriminately. We have to change, because the story is our story, and it's not a pretty story.
That's why I always like to wrap it up with you, Dr. Toure. I mean, you brought it home. But I see that Mr. Newby had a question. Mr. Newby, you had a question?
Well, more of a statement. What Dr. Jamal was saying, as far as the business side of the prison, what this discussion is about, making money off of, companies are making money off of basically free labor. But also, laws are created by lawmakers. And so when you have 50% of a population and over 45% of another population, minority population that goes through this system, now you're taking away their votes also to help change these laws. So that's why, there has to be some type of reform. Also with the, in reference to the marijuana, not to try to beat this up or anything, but like I said, I understand, the purpose of lessening the crime of marijuana, but I just want to take caution that we don't normalize the use of marijuana, because that itself can be dangerous. Marijuana to some is a gateway drug that leads to other things. So, and I think the biggest thing to help deter, the disparity, again, is community policing. Once we get community policing more effective and back dealing with the communities, then that will help lessen more African Americans, more Latinos going to jail for marijuana use or marijuana possession. That's all I had.
Well, thank you for that. And I know that there are competing views on that, on the thought of whether marijuana is a gateway drug. And I always like to go back to what I've witnessed growing up in the inner city and in a neighborhood that slowly turned to a high crime area, and watching those individuals who started out using marijuana. And by the time we were in our late teens, or I was in my late teens, I saw those individuals gradually go into using the more serious drugs. So yeah, I know that there are competing viewpoints out there. But getting back to Dr. Toure, and I know Mr. Thompson had a question, I want to say that you raised a lot of interesting points. And that is why when I'm out and about on the campaign trail, I say always leave people with this thought, is that when people see the office of district attorney as being legitimate and fair, they're going to be more willing to participate in helping do things like solve crimes and become witnesses. Because when you grow up in the inner city and you've seen the wrongdoings that happen in the inner city, especially in an inner city that is comprised of African Americans, and how law enforcement treat African Americans, even the Black law enforcement agencies. That changes your thought process. That changes your views on this whole system we call justice. That is exactly why I've made mass incarceration my #1 platform issue, because mass incarceration seeks to preserve a system of injustice and privilege. And Dr. Toure touched upon that. And I'm happy to say that I'm the only candidate for district attorney who is advocating and will institute restorative justice programs in our state and superior courts. So I wanted to say that. Moving on to Mr. Thompson before we wrap it up and end. Mr. Thompson, did you have a question? And I think Mr. Eiffel, Attorney Eiffel, had a question. So I'll go to Mr. Thompson and then Attorney Eiffel. Mr. Thompson?
Just a quick comment regarding what Dexter said. The fact that these that voting rights are taken away from prisoners that have been through the system and then made it back out is a huge thing. If we were able to get someone that had experienced these things, we could then pose questions to the community and then vote on those questions. And who better to vote on how we can improve the prison system is former prisoners that have made it through the system, have actually been reformed or what have you. How do we then take that away from them, take that right away from them? I mean, it's a cycle. It's a cycle that's been built, but it's a cycle that can also be broken. And then the same term goes around to, I think a good way, a great way to end these types of things is term limits. Let's put term limits on legislators, senators. We've got, you serve 2 terms, maybe 3, and then you have to let it go. And at that point, whatever businesses are intertwined with your elected office go away. I think that's one way that we can fight this, and I think I would definitely support that.
Thank you, Mr. Thompson. Attorney Eiffel?
Okay, there we go. Can you hear me?
Yes, sir.
Yes, I have a statement, not a question. I believe Kennedy Ring and my brother Jamal touched on this also. I think one of the most important reforms that needs to be had is bail reform. The elimination of cash bail, I think, would exponentially help eliminate some of the mass incarceration that we're currently facing in our country. You have to see that minorities are, one, disproportionately arrested in our country for various different crimes. And typically they do not have the resources, whether it be assets or monetary resources, to post cash bail. Therefore, a lot of them are actually taking plea deals, which include some type of jail time or some type of conviction that they might not otherwise take any event that they were actually out from incarceration and being able to provide for them families. I see it time and time again as a tactic of law enforcement and of the judicial system, with allowing these individuals to have cases stacked against them where they know they're facing a lot of time and they don't have the resources to get out. So I think if we can get to the root of eliminating cash bail, we will definitely put a dent in the mass incarceration. And I know I got clients who are in the bail industry, and I know I'm going to catch a lot of flack for it, but I think it's the right thing that we need to do.
Yeah, thank you, Attorney Eiffel. That is an excellent point. And one thing what I would like to say about that is that is a question that, as you're out on the campaign trail, cash bail and thoughts on cash bail should be directed at your judicial candidates, because they are the ones who determine the amount of bail, especially for those individuals who can only receive bond by having a Superior Court judge set bond. As a practicing criminal defense attorney, one of the things that I regularly do is I argue for a recognizance bond for those individuals I know should qualify for that. And if you ask, more often than not, sometimes you're granted that, but it's the judge that will make the decision whether or not to permit someone to just bond out on their own recognizance. That means not having to post a cash bail. And then it's your state lawmaker. So all of your candidates for state house and for the Senate, those questions should be directed at them, because they can go in and they can make laws to address that. Did anyone else have a question or follow-up thought? I see Dr. Toure may have something he wants to say.
Yes, ma'am. Yes, indeed. And that's when Brother Eiffel said what he said. One of the most famous cases, or the most famous case of why the need for bail reform involved Khalif Browder, a 16-year-old who was in New York, who was in prison on Rikers Island with adults. Here it is, he's a teenager, and later on finding out that this young man had been in prison for years because, one, his family couldn't afford to do any bail for him. And in addition, he's now beaten up, brutalized inside the jail. Brutalized, a 16-year-old teen. Later on, he comes out and he goes to college, but later on, he hangs himself. He commits suicide because of the trauma that occurred with regards to his family not being able to basically get him out because, again, economic situation. But also, as Brother Eiffel threw out there, it was tied to with regard to the prosecution, how they intentionally, the witness had left the country, and that it was a lie, it was incorrect. They just picked him out of a group of teens and said, you're the one that did it. So now here goes this young man, a life that was expendable, an expendable life, and those folks are still working with regards to the system right now. Khalif Browder's story is one that people should know and understand, and that's a part of the trauma of this entire society. And we need to rectify that. There should be no more Khalif Browders. Let people understand that.
Thank you for that, Dr. Toure. Thank you for that. Are there any other questions before we wrap it up? Any other thoughts? Okay, well, I'll give everyone a minute to give closing thoughts, beginning with Mr. Max Sims. Do you have any closing thoughts, sir?
Sure. Well, thank you so much for having us today. Again, this conversation is so important and really ties in a very intersectional way with so many of the other problems that we have in this country when it comes to generational poverty and when it comes to trying to build resilient communities. So we need to continue having this conversation, but we also need to elect people that are going to push the policies that help to solve this problem. And that's everybody from sheriffs to DAs to judges, state legislatures, congressmen, and of course, the president. You know, it's so important that we continue our advocacy on this issue and that we really build on these solutions. It's not enough to just talk about the solutions. We have to go out there and do it. That's why I encourage everybody to vote in this upcoming election, both in the primary in June and in November. We are in one of the most important elections in our lifetimes. So please make sure that you're registered. Please make sure that you vote. Again, I have been Max Sims, running for Georgia House District 163 as a Democrat. And thank you so much for having us on today.
Thank you, Mr. Sims. Ms. Ring, do you have any closing thoughts, ma'am?
I do. This is a discussion that could go on for hours because there is still so much to talk about and ways that we can solve the problems that we face. I do want to mention, it was touched on, but I believe that part of a system of reform would include not only restoring voting rights to those who have been incarcerated, but also removing mandatory sentencing, and also, as was already mentioned, not treating our children as if they are adults, treating them in a juvenile court rather than an adult court. So those are just some issues that are of importance to me. Again, I just want to reiterate that who our leaders are matter, what they stand for, and if they actually represent our communities matters. Where they get their funding, their donors, who is backing them, who is supporting them, who is helping them get elected, tells exactly what they stand for. And we today need to look at our candidates and say to ourselves, are they in this for themselves or are they in this for me? So please, I encourage everybody, know who you're voting for. Look at their history. Look at not only what they say, what they've been saying for the past 3 to 6 months, but look at what they've done over a lifetime. So, and thank you for this opportunity.
Thank you, Ms. Ring. Excellent points. So, Mr. Newby, would you like to offer closing thoughts, sir?
I would just like to say, thank you for allowing me to be a part of this. This is a very interesting and important discussion. And I think everyone agrees that, voting matters. If the only way that things are going to change is you have to voice, your opinion, and through voting, that's how it gets done. So if you know somebody who don't vote, talk to them until your face turns blue and get them out there to vote. That's all I have, and thank you again.
Thank you, Mr. Newby. Mr. Thompson, would you like to offer closing thoughts, sir?
Yes, thank you again, Zena, for holding this platform. It is a refreshing experience to see so many people that want to do something about this. Going back to the voting, we have to understand that what we're talking about today is not new. That we didn't just find this out today or last week. This has been a systemic thing for year over year over year. And guess what? The state government is not new. They have had a chance to do something about this. It's time to take those elected officials out and put people in that want to do something for the people, something that's measurable, something that we will be held accountable for, and something that we will be able to come back home to our children, to my daughter, and say, look what daddy did. I did this for the city. And I think it's time that we made that change. Thank you. I've been Marcus Thompson, candidate for state representative for District 164.
Thank you, Mr. Thompson, for bringing up the issue of systemic racism. My next panel discussion will surround that, will be about systemic racism and its effect on the justice system. So thank you for mentioning that. I'll now move on to, Mr. Mahoney. I thought you had left. Mr. Mahoney, would you like to offer closing statement, sir?
Yes, I'd just like to say thank you, Zena, for putting this together. Thank you for allowing me to participate. A wealth of information has been shared. The work begins now. We have to take this information, go back into our various communities, and be about the work. If we're not going to be about the work, we're never going to embark the change. So we've got to create those success stories that we can embark on, that we can share and collaborate with others and partner with other communities and learn from them as well. So I'd like to say thank you for putting together this forum. It was greatly appreciated. Wealth of information shared. Thank you so much.
And thank you for participating, sir. I'll now move on to Attorney Eiffel. Would you like to offer closing thoughts, sir?
Yes. Thank you once again for putting together this forum. I think it was very insightful. But I have to say this, it's time for action. We have enough talk. We know what the issues are. We've known it for years and decades. It's time for action. We need leaders who are going to be hold themselves accountable to actually bringing about meaningful change. I'm tired of all the talk. I'm tired of all the forums. I'm sorry, but I want to see some realistic changes in our communities that's actually going to affect the people who are really disproportionately affected by this mass incarceration, by the bail system that we have, by the corrupt political and law enforcement practices. I want to see meaningful change. So, I like being a part of these discussions, but I want to see people who are in place to make meaningful change, and I want to see it happening now.
Thank you, Attorney Eiffel. And we will now move to Dr. Torre to close us out.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you for the opportunity. And reiterate the point that was just made, we have to be about solutions right now. Solutions. Homelessness, crime and punishment, politics, legal system, economics, education are not fads. We have to stop being faddish. We have to stop being caught to what's popular for today. We need systemic growth. We need systemic changes in our systems. And that's what needs to occur. And so again, it's not about being a fad, it's about generations. Generations being healthy and able to succeed. And that will make us a better nation. That's why I tell people, have no fear in anyone being better than you, because that sets the bar to another level. And we need to be about equity right now. But again, can no longer be about fads. Let's come with solutions, and that's involving actions.
Thank you, Dr. Torre. In the comments section, someone asked for your contact information. So hopefully you all are sharing this on your Facebook pages. If you can also send your contact information via your comments section so that those who are watching can contact you. So it's important that you type in your contact information, your web pages, your email address, so that people can contact you. I want to thank each and every one of you for participating on this panel discussion on the business of prison. Again, I am Zena McClain, your candidate for district attorney. I encourage all of your listeners and your followers to vote on June 9th. This election is a very important one. So again, vote June 9th in your respective primaries. It has indeed been my pleasure. You all have a pleasant rest of your day and good day. Bye-bye. Bye-bye, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good day.
Good day.
Appreciate it. Appreciate it.
Bye-bye.